just going to set the tent up now. What I'll do is I'll get the inner of the tent up first, and then I will measure the wind speed. I would guess it's about 15 to 20 mile an hour. Quite cold because it's only about 1 or 2 degrees. In fact, maybe close on freezing. So I'll set the camera down and get the tent up first, and let you see how the inner alone stands and performs in the wind. That's the inner of the tent now set up. The tent's not really under any pressure at all, so no rush to stick the fly sheet on at the moment. What I'll do is I'll get some of the things inside the tent. It's a wee bit easier to get them inside and a bit quicker when the fly sheet's not actually on it. So I'll get some of the things inside the tent, maybe change the top as well and get a bit more protected. And then I'll go out and stick the fly sheet on and measure the wind. Okay, this is just inside the tent at the moment, and I'm going to go outside now. I've got most things pretty much organised. I'm going to go out and measure the wind with both of these devices. I don't know how well this will come up. On the left is a little Proster. Got this off Amazon for £10, and on the right I have a Silva ADC wind meter. So we'll see if there's any variations in the two of them, and we'll get some wind speed readings. The tent at the moment is not guide out, and I feel that a tent should be inherently strong without being guide out, because you can't always depend on the guys. So we'll see how it goes relating to wind speed and the fact that the tent isn't even guide out yet. Okay, so outside I recorded a wind speed. It's steady, sort of 28-29 miles per hour, gusts maybe slightly over that. It is quite hard to measure the wind speed and get it just exactly right, because you may not be getting gusts every 10 seconds. I mean, you could just get a big gust every couple of minutes, so you do end up getting quite cold hands and also quite a cold jaw when you're out there. But that's the sort of speed, and then this is just the view inside the tent. It's actually fairly quiet and very, very stable. Okay, it's now 11 o'clock in the evening. I've just been outside, and the wind speed at the moment is about 25 miles per hour with 30 miles per hour gusts. And this is a view that you're getting obviously inside the tent. The inner of this tent, with the tent pitching inner first, the inner of the tent then is under incredibly good tension, and that means that the tent, it doesn't flap around in any way. You'll just get like a little bit of vibration, so it means that it's a really comfortable environment to be in. But the disadvantage obviously to an inner tent first pitching tent is that if it's raining, then you need to be able to get the tent up very quickly. Incidentally, pitching this tent under fairly high wind conditions, I mean, what I will do is I will open the back door and front door of the tent, pop the two main poles through, the two main crossover poles in the center of the tent, and then add in the side poles then quickly afterwards. And with the tent being open, I mean, no matter how windy it is, the wind can just blow straight through it. But again, the disadvantage in that is if it's raining, you can't do that. So the tent's a little bit awkward, certainly to pitch during high rain, but not during high winds. I mean, it pitches really easily. I mean, the tent, incidentally, is a North Face Mountain 25. Unfortunately for the review, it's an older model. It's probably 10-15 years old, so the new design has changed somewhat. I would like to be able to review one of the new tents, but I don't have one, and I'm actually not convinced that they're any better than the old ones, so I'll not be purchasing one in the too distant future. The things that I really like about this tent are obviously the tension that's on the inner, and the pole configuration. The poles here are, I suppose, grouped towards the back and front of the tent, and wherever you have the poles, you've got really good support. So that means the back of the tent and the front of the tent are incredibly strong, but it would be a little bit more vulnerable here, you know, from the sides. But realistically, you're always going to pitch a tent tail into the wind anyway, so I think it's good to have the strength then actually at the back. Earlier on, you saw a tent perform in the winds and it wasn't even guyed out, and as I said before, it's great just to have that strength so that you're not depending on the guys. I mean, I've had a number of tents very similar to this. I started off with a Terra Nova Quasar, then I went to a Terra Nova Ultra Quasar, then I went to a Mountain Hardware Triangle 2, then I had another Triangle 2, and then I finally ended up with this one. All of the tents, I must say, I was very disappointed with until I actually bought this one. The Quasars just lacked features. The first Quasar, the outer of the tent just sagged something absolutely shocking. The Ultra Quasar, the fly sheet didn't come right down to the ground, and in high winds and high rain, you would get splashback, and that is the rain would actually hit the ground at the bottom of the tent and bounce back up and soak the inner. Then I moved on with my first Triangle, and I must admit I really liked the Triangle. When I got my second Triangle, I felt that it just hadn't been improved very much, and the thing that I don't like about the Triangles is that they're actually very bendy and very flexible in the wind. The way the poles are just designed, the crossover points, instead of being here, would be a bit higher, and if this crossover point, I'm not sure how well this will come out in the video, is higher, the length of unsupported pole, that is from the crossover point to the ground, is greater, which allows for greater flexibility. This here, the crossover point is here, it's actually quite low down, and it gives the strength at the side of the tent, whereas if that crossover point is high, it pushes the strength actually more towards the roof. So for wind, it's better to have the crossover point a little bit lower, reduces the length of unsupported pole and reduces the flexibility. The argument would be then that you're taking some of the strength away from the roof, but I can absolutely assure you the roof of this tent is very strong. So when I bought this tent, I was just so impressed with it. The tension on the inner is absolutely fabulous. The tension also on the outside, it's an American version of a North Face 25. So it's a polyester fly sheet, and a polyester doesn't absorb water when wet. So you need to retension the tent less after you've initially put it up, which is a great feature. And I found the polyester also to be, incredibly strong. So the one amazing thing about this tent is the rigidity, and I have spoken a little bit about that before, and that is that it just doesn't bend or flex in the wind. It just stands completely solid. And I feel that when a tent starts to flex, it's losing its internal volume, so it's starting to fail. Now, certainly it's good that it maybe flexes a little bit in the wind, and ultimately this obviously will, but it will hold its form just incredibly well. I would guess that I have had this tent out in 50 to 60 mile an hour winds, and even in 60 miles an hour winds, the whole inner structure is just still exactly the same. It just doesn't bend, and it's just due to very small differences in that pole geometry. The poles here actually on the sides of the tent are quite arced, and they're under quite a lot of tension. So because they're quite arced and under a lot of tension, it's hard to push against them. And again, in the likes of the triangles and even the quasars, there's not as much tension on the pole, so it's easier for the wind to deform it and push against it. Now I know the makers of those tents would probably say, well, it's good that the pole isn't under as much tension, it's not under so much stress. But I can say, and honestly say, after owning this tent for 7 or 8 years and regularly pitching it and using it in high winds, I have never had a problem with a bent pole or a damaged pole or any signs of stress on the pole. It has worked really, really well for me. Features of the tent: you have a pocket just behind the camera, a pocket on the same side, on the other side at the front of the tent, a pocket here at the back of the tent, and then a pocket here in the roof, the same just above the camera, far side of the tent, and another pocket here. You've also got ventilation options. Here you can open up the tent like that, or you can actually just have the mesh there. So superb ventilation as well in the tent. I'm going to pick up the camera now and show you the rear porch, and also then show you the front porch. Okay, so looking just again, this is the pole configuration with the crossover points. You can just about see the pocket at the top, other pocket on the other side, crossover points. Wind has died down a little bit, and I'm now just going to open up to let you sort of see. So this is the porch at the back. Get a rucksack in here, absolutely no problem. One of the other points here that's a bit different on a lot of tents, this here outer is actual tent fabric or inner tent fabric, and it means if you're using a tent in snow that it doesn't pick up spindrift or catch the snow. A lot of tents will actually have the mesh here on the outside, and that's just a nightmare in snow. It just picks up snow and holds snow so easily. The other disadvantage of having the mesh on the outside is that mesh gets really, really easy damaged. Okay, so I was just talking about the mesh on the tent. My SD card is full on my GoPro, so I'm just switching over to the phone here. Yeah, the big advantage for me, or two advantages of having the mesh on the inside of the tent fabric, is that it protects it from damage, and also if you're using the tent in snow, you don't get this mesh balled up with spindrift. So I talked about some of the other features. Tension on the side walls is fantastic. North Face uses a foam spacer here just behind my hand, and that really helps keep good tension, good separation between the outer and the inner. I have an interior hanging line here, which actually use a guy line. So that just means that if one of my guy lines breaks, or both of my, I have the same on the other side, if both of my guy lines break outside, I've got options. Other features of the tent here, you have glow-in-the-dark zipper pulls. These are kind of like fluorescent and they absorb the light of your torch. And then once you put your torch out, you can see all of these, so you know where to unzip the tent. Also, the gauge of the zippers, I mean, is massive, so it's just really, really strong. And we're just going to look now just out into the porch. So you've got a great porch in the tent, and the porch pole here is relatively high. It's just a little bit smaller maybe than this pole here at the top, so it gives you really, really good height. The porch's walls are also quite vertical. I have had this tent pitched face into the wind, or front into the wind, and the porch has just been incredibly strong. It's guyed from roughly the middle of the seam, just about there on both sides. So it's very, very strong, and the guy line goes directly around the pole. And a little window at the front. Don't really know the benefit of that. And that's about it. So finally, just talk about a few other things. Unfortunately, I feel that manufacturers don't always make products better. As time goes on, they just look at other ways that they can actually cut costs. And they obviously change designs in order to sell, their products. I would love to be able to buy a new one of these, or something that I thought was as good. There are 2 generations of Mountain 25 following on from this one. The one directly after this, I think, is a really, really good tent because it has a double silicone fly sheet, which is incredibly strong. But as I said earlier, the poles come down and cross at the side of the tent here, which makes it stronger at the side, but maybe slightly less strength at the rear. That design pretty much stays for the final model, which is the current one. And the current one, again, as I said, the poles cross at the side, giving it a bit more strength at the side but less at the rear. But they now use a combination fly sheet, and that's silicone on the outside and PU on the inside. And I am not convinced that this is a step forward. Also, the way that the tent is made, if you look at these seams here, the fabric kind of runs along and is tucked up into that on both sides, and I just feel that that particular design is incredibly strong. The new ones, the design, all of the seams are actually like this one, where the fabric just kind of like is a bit of an overlap, and I'm just not convinced. I mean, that's not a high stress point in the tent. I'm not convinced that the new way of doing it is better than the old. When I've sort of had a feel around these tents and felt all the seams and checked all the seams and just looked at the general build quality, I mean, it's amazing. I have a brand new North Face V25, and it's okay, but I'm just not totally convinced in the benefits of the new fabric being silicone and PU. I'm not just sure that it is as strong. So apart from any video footage that I'll take in the morning, this is going to conclude my night out and my review of this North Face Mountain 25. The strengths of the tent are pitching it in the wind is really, really good. Its wind performance is fantastic. Its snow performance is amazing. Its build quality and choice of fabrics is fantastic. The inner tent first pitch and the general tension on the inner, and all of the features like all the pockets, the zipper pulls that glow in the dark, all absolutely great. Disadvantages would be really weight. I think the tent possibly could be a little bit lighter. I do quite like tents that are symmetrical, in that the back is exactly the same as the front. So you could probably save a little bit of weight by not having the front porch. But then you would have the detriment or the disadvantage then of less cooking space. But it would be a way to get the weight down. But apart from that, I can't fault this tent. It is at the end of the day a two-person tent, so carrying between two people, no problem at all. My pack weight coming up here tonight is 13 kilograms, which is I find that fairly heavy. I would be 80 kilograms myself, and I'm reasonably fit and healthy, but I do find that once it gets to that 13, it's probably about 13 and a half actually, it is getting a bit heavy. But here where I'm camped on Luke's Mountain is only 300 metres, so it's not the end of the world in respect of the distance that I'm walking up. So I'll take the heavier tent to just really enjoy its features, when I'm here. It's now 8 o'clock in the morning, and I'm going to go out and do a quick video, maybe a quick couple of pictures of sunrise, and measure the wind speed, and then get the tent down, and that's us packed up and good to go home. It's been a good night, very windy, didn't sleep great, but that's just par for the course, I suppose. Just pretty noisy in the tent, and a little bit chilled, I think, but going to finish off obviously now. The pond at the top here of Luke's Mountain, all nicely iced up at this end. When I pan